Today on the TMZ Podcast.
Welcome to the TMZ Podcast. Eric here. How you doing? Very sad news this morning.
Sad. More sad news from the hip-hop world. Takeoff from the Migos is dead at the age of 28. He was at a bowling alley in Houston, was playing dice, and apparently some sort of altercation broke out, and he was shot in the head and died on the scene. This is just sad. He was 28 years old. He was the youngest member of the Migos.
But all the members of the Migos were known by name, right? I mean, they were a huge musical act.
Takeoff, Offset, and Quavo. Quavo was there with him. Quavo is Takeoff's uncle, and they actually had a new project out. They called it Unc and Few because they're uncle and nephew. Quavo was trying to get someone to save him. He was, calling 911 and there was a nurse there that he was trying to say, how can she help him? I mean, devastating for him. It's not just his friend or his bandmate; it's his family.
Yes, and the photos up on the website at TMZ are just jarring because this is a life just struck down in an instant. It sounds like from the 911 call they're seeing if anything can be done, but I think this was either shot in the head or near the head. This is a pretty instant sort of death, and suddenly this band, which was at the top of the heap in terms of rap acts,
they're important in hip-hop. Of course, probably their most famous song is Bad and Bougie. I mean, for a lot of hip-hop fans, if you just say the word raindrop, they know drop top's the next line. And Migos didn't invent, trap music, but they popularized it. That song was sort of a moment, a breakthrough moment, that everything after that song kind of sounded like that song.
Yeah.
Like country artists now are using trap beats, and a lot of it's because of Migos popularizing that sound.
Look, I mean, to contextualize a death of this sort of nature, if you weren't familiar with the Migos, and I don't want to sort of overstate, but this is a huge musician death by a shooting. The only other one that I can think of who was killed by a shooting is John Lennon at the sort. I mean, they're big. They're big. They're not the Beatles. No. I'm not trying to say they're the Beatles, but to a certain community, Migos is a gigantic, sort of band.
Well, no,
and
just
someone
within
to be
hip hop,
struck
you've
down.
got Biggie and Tupac and these people, and Takeoff was maybe.
But in a band, you might think he's not the biggest, but he's gigantic. They're all big, is what I'm trying to say.
Everybody knows
everyone.
It wasn't
was big.
like there was Takeoff, Quavo, and Offset. The three of them were so individually famous in their own right. It's sort of like we mentioned this earlier, like with TLC. Like everybody knew T-Boss, Chili, and Left Eye. Like,
there you go.
They're such distinct
example.
personalities, and they're all so successful in their own right. It's just sad. Like he had still a whole entire career left ahead of him.
No, and now we live in such a day and age where you saw what was happening in his life right up until this moment. It was
he
carefree.
Posted a photo. There was a selfie
Instagram.
of him in the clothes he was wearing at the bowling alley, like an hour or two before the shooting. Like he was just going to a bowling alley, and now he's dead.
Yes, and that's it, and sort of struck down, and we'll still feel the reverberations of this. There will obviously be criminal investigations. This was a shooting in a bowling alley, playing dice. This wasn't sort of a home intrusion or something where there's a lot of doubt. There were a lot of people there. There's going to be a lot of witnesses who saw what happened. We'll see how this plays out. Sometimes people sort of circle the wagons and no one says anything, and other times we'll learn more, but just an absolute tragedy. You will see an outpouring of people who just were touched by Takeoff in some meaningful way, and it's a huge loss for music.
It is. And it's also, I mean, we'll get more details, of course, I'm sure, very soon about who did this, how it happened, what happened, why. But so far, it seems like, with P&B Rock, we saw it was targeted. That it was a robbery. With XXX Tentacion, it was that. This seems like maybe just a fight broke out. Just tempers flared and guns came out. We don't know yet exactly, but
I mean, details will come out. It would sound, the things we do know is it came from a dice game. Sometimes tempers flare when gambling's involved and whatnot, but it should never rise to this kind of level. And it's absolutely tragic how quickly this happened, and how momentous this really is for the world of music and just for the families involved. I mean, as you said, they're all related.
Yeah,
true.
The Migos
this
were related.
Is Quavo's nephew. To see your nephew shot in cold blood in the middle of a bowling alley during an otherwise celebratory event is just horrific. It's absolutely horrific.
It's very sad.
Let's move on to another sad story in a different way. Is Tom Brady and his divorce with Gisele. The divorce filing happened from Gisele earlier. It was very quick. It was signed by the judge. They are officially divorced and single. And now Tom is starting to speak a little bit about the situation. Here's what he had to say on his podcast with Jim Gray, the Let's Go podcast.
Yeah, Jim. I think there's a lot of professionals in life that go through things that they deal with at work and they deal with at home. And obviously the good news is it's a very amicable situation, and I'm really focused on two things, and taking care of my family and certainly my children, and secondly, doing the best job I can to win football games. So that's what professionals do. You focus at work when it's time to work, and then when you come home, you focus on the priorities that are at home, and all you can do is the best you could do.
So I want to break this apart in a couple ways. First, he says he doesn't speak Giselle's name. He doesn't mention her by name, but it is his ex-wife. Everyone knows who he's talking
saying,
about.
Is this animosity that he won't even say her name? I don't think so.
It doesn't feel indicative
If you were
of that.
getting divorced and I was talking to you about it, I wouldn't expect you to necessarily say your wife's name.
No.
We know who you're talking about. Why?
This is the biggest story of the past month and a half. He doesn't need to lay out the foundation of Gisele being his wife who just got divorced. I do think when he says it's a very amicable situation, there's some doubt I have about that. I think all divorces, even the ones that say we are having an amicable divorce, they're all nasty to a certain extent. That's why you're divorcing.
Yeah, there's a reason you're not together.
There's a reason.
If it was that amicable, you'd still be married.
Yeah, exactly. Most fights in a divorce are resolved, and the ones that aren't lead to divorce, and those are very big, momentous.
You mean fights in a marriage? You said
shifts.
fights in a divorce.
Sorry.
I see where your head is already.
I know. But listen, you've been married for a while. I've been married. You have fights. They happen, and you resolve them. When they end in divorce, it's not what I would call amicable. I've always found that word very, very strange. It does mean that they're doing it in a way that they're keeping their kids, the focus on, prioritizing their well-being through what could be an otherwise traumatic thing to happen for a family. But amicable is a very strange thing.
I guess it just means not
nasty,
resentful
and contentious.
Yeah, like Johnny and Amber was definitely not amicable.
Right.
They have issues. There's certainly some resentments there, I think, probably on both sides.
They released the separate statements. That was a big indication that they didn't release a joint statement, and we do a lot of divorces around here. If you release a joint statement, it's the best case you have to say, we're really on the same page.
We get along
enough
that we can put our name on the same piece of paper and jointly do this, but when you're doing it separately, you are living different lives.
Yeah, but to their credit, all the contentiousness happened behind the scenes with a private mediation, so it is better to go into divorce court and say, hey, judge, just sign off on this. We've split everything up. Whatever squabbling we had to do, we did behind the scenes, because that would be rough on a family, especially a family with young kids, to read news stories about
and that's
here's the bickering back and forth.
If nothing else, no matter what resentments they have with each other, they know they have small children, and they know they are both incredibly public people, and that there will be a lot of discussion about this. You want to shield your children from that the best you can, unless you're an absolutely horrible, bitter person.
Yes.
And it seems like neither of them are that.
No, and I think given their level of celebrity, they've handled it as responsibly as possible. People are going to be interested in the divorce of Tom and Gisele. There's no way around that. There will be a lot of news stories, but they've dampened it to the extent possible in terms of the nasty details that go on in dividing up assets and so forth. The other thing I want to focus on is he is talking a lot about what Harvey is obsessed with, compartmentalization, and the extent to which it is possible to have a professional life that you keep in one silo and a personal life in another silo. Here, I don't think he did that very well. Harvey thinks he's the best at it. But he is saying he does what goes on at work is at work and what goes on at home, but you can't keep those worlds entirely divided.
I think he did it too well. Because so Harvey's thing is, and I get it to his point that, like, if you're having problems at home, you can't drag that into your professional life.
Sure.
If you're having a miserable day at work, you can't take that home. I think Tom Brady compartmentalized and is like, okay, football is my life here. Gisele and the kids are my life here, but he
almost
made the football.
sociopathically.
No, but the football, she sort of was shut out of that, in the sense that he's like, I'm compartmentalizing this, and it became such a dominating part of his life. It squeezed her out.
Interesting.
Like,
I hadn't
he
had that
compartmentalized, and then her compartment became very tiny, I think.
Yes.
And football became everything. And if she has no part in that, you feel alone in a marriage. That seems to be what their issue's been the whole time.
That's interesting. My read was a little bit different. I thought he thinks that you can sort of compartmentalize these things successfully, but he actually failed at it. When I look at Tom Brady this season, I see a broken man. He's gaunt. He's not playing football as well. He's frustrated. He's throwing the iPad more. He looks like the personal has infected the professional, not to his discredit. I mean, when you're dealing with something a lot emotionally at home, it invariably is going to impact the way you conduct yourself at work. It's hard. He's got a profession where you have to maintain laser focus. Those defenses are very sophisticated. He's a very top of his game quarterback, but something bad is going on at home, and it's impacting, to me, it seems it's impacting his play. So,
and you can only compartmentalize so much.
Exactly.
Because then it becomes unhealthy
down.
that it's like, oh, I'm going to deny and shut out for whatever chunk of the day this part of my life that's having a huge impact on me.
Yes.
Well, that's not healthy.
I think you will see now his football tick up a little bit. Now that there's finality, he's not going to mediation.
Oh, so we're going to say that she was holding him back?
I won't push that narrative.
No.
You will hear it. You will probably hear it, but I won't push that. I'll just
nothing
say
else to focus on but that. And,
exactly.
and we talk about
singular obsession will be
people
football
he'll
again.
be the most eligible bachelor and be out partying and all that. He's never been that guy.
Nah.
He's a very
He's not going to be dating Instagram models. That's not who Tom Brady is.
And certainly not during the football season.
No, certainly not during the football season. But we'll have to see. I think he will actually, you'll see the season turn around, and he'll get a new storyline, which is, wow, Tom Brady's still the GOAT. We should have known all along. We sold him short, blah, blah, blah.
What, early to mid-40s now?
Early 40s, man.
How much longer can it go?
Well, now he doesn't have a wife who says retire. So maybe he'll keep playing. I
don't
know.
He falls apart.
Football's also therapy for him. He probably wants to keep playing to avoid life's problems. Let's move on to another compartmentalization story, if you will.
Problem couple. Khloe and Tristen. So Kim Kardashian had a huge Halloween bash. She does this every year.
Big holiday for that family.
And Khloe and Tristan.
Did you see her costume, by the way? She dressed up as Mystique.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was pretty good.
I thought it was pretty good.
Khloe and Tristan showed up together. Mm-hmm. And they are saying this is nothing romantic. This is, co-parenting. Do you have to show up together? I get you don't want the kids to think you hate each other. And
sure.
The kids, their children, especially, they're so young. They don't need to know anything about the cheating and all that. But do you need to do this united front?
I don't think so. I actually take issue with this. I mean, some people will celebrate this as she is acting in such a mature fashion, putting the children first and allowing to have this wholesome Halloween celebration with dad there and mom there, and they're being civil to one another. I actually think Tristan is so incorrigible and his behavior is so bad that he becomes sort of toxic as a role model to children and somewhat confusing to be around. It's okay that he's their father, he can parent them.
The children are not going to know all that.
They won't, but it's almost the strange sort of kabuki theater they have to put on to seem like she's okay with what happened.
I don't know why they have to do that.
They don't.
We said,
they can both
Kim and
involve
Kanye,
parents.
to the best that they are able, are trying to figure out how to co-parent. Kim definitely does not want to shut Kanye out of his children's lives.
Yes.
Although he says the opposite, but he still shows up to things.
Sure.
But they don't show up together to things. They don't. There's being amicable, and then there's, what are you doing? You're not a couple.
Yeah, what are you doing? You're not a couple. And it's not as though Khloe is co-signing on the behavior that got them here, but by allowing it and allowing him to sort of just participate in family functions as if nothing happened, I think is strange, and over time will become even stranger unless he changes his behavior radically. Let's say True is very young. The new baby is obviously an infant.
Yeah.
Doesn't know at all what's going on. True,
Which
I don't know.
Which new baby? He has a couple new babies.
This is true. His new baby with the surrogate with Khloe. But over time, if he continues to behave in such a, incorrigible is the best word I have for him, because he just keeps doing it. He lives the NBA lifestyle of going out to clubs. That's going to be strange over time.
For the children?
I think so.
Because they can know, my dad's a cad. He was bad for my mom, but he's not a bad dad. Like a relationship with a significant other and a relationship with a child are two different things.
Fair enough.
And they might be able my dad, I'm sure Tristan will be dating 23-year-olds for the rest of his life.
Sure.
No matter how old he gets.
Very charming.
And his kids will grow up being like, that's my dad.
As
long as he's good to them.
But you don't think Khloe has to be involved in that? It's not that they're playing house. They don't live together. No. He just showed up in an event. So I don't want to overstate what's going on.
And there were cameras there, of course, because it's the Kardashians, which makes sense. They probably filmed Kim's Halloween party because it's a thing. But Khloe knows they're filming. She knows, is this just for the show?
Oh,
I know
sure.
we've been saying about the Kardashians since the beginning. But at a point,
I mean this in a very real sense. Everything is for the show to a certain extent in their life, and that's just a reality. Now, is their life entirely like a simulation of a real life just for storylines? I don't think so. I don't think anyone can conduct the entirety of their life solely to feed ratings. But a larger portion than you could imagine is built around that.
Well, it'd be really good for the show if we invited Tristan.
Yeah, I think that factors in. I think they
does.
sit with producers and say, would this be a good storyline? Would the conflict here work? Can we work with this idea? That will be confusing, I think, to kids over time, although this will be
maybe not
the only reality they know.
Because these aren't normal kids either. Yeah, those children have had cameras in their faces from the second they were born. They don't know any other life.
Yes.
Even the Kardashians themselves, even Kendall and Kylie were young when the show started, but they still had semi-normal childhoods. I mean, their father was very famous.
They had a portion of normal.
And Bruce Jenner was very famous when he was their stepfather.
But this generation, truly famous and
They
with
don't know
cameras in
any
their
other life.
household from the beginning.
Between social media and the TV shows.
And we've seen what it's done to North. No cameras. She can be monstrous at times. I love North, but she has got quite a Spitfire personality. She'll be fun to see grow up. Let's move on to another element of the Kardashians. So Kanye West at a soccer game. This is Saint's soccer game, his young son, and he's having what appears to be a heated exchange with another parent at the game.
Well, is it a parent or was it somebody who is a friend of the family or works for the family? There's a little dispute on who the person is.
That's right. It could have been someone who's connected to the family, but what is clear is it's an animated conversation. I don't want to say a fight because you can have animated conversations waving your hands around where you're not angry.
We can't hear the audio at all. There's video of this,
That's right.
and you see Kanye and this person, very animated.
And we see him storm off
and
at the end.
he storms off, and
Yes.
then the video ends. We do hear he did come back after that and hang out for the rest of the game and was pretty chill.
Yes, and Kim, during the entire altercation, it couldn't have been so bad that she intervened because she just sits there on her lawn chair. You know, I have a kid who plays soccer.
She has security around her.
You got security, you put out your lawn chair, you watch your kid play soccer. I think she's trying to inject sort of some calm into the situation because this kind of acting out at a child soccer game is bad. I don't think we can really quibble with whether this is a good environment or a good thing for Saint to see and he should be able to express himself. No, this is the bad stuff that we're talking about, and I think it will factor in potentially if there's a custody dispute, because when a judge sees something like this and sees that the behavior and the antics of Kanye West, his tweets, what have you, listen, he's allowed to speak his mind.
He's
but
a public personality.
He's a public personality. I think he said some horrific things, but when he brings this kind of behavior and it's sort of impulse-driven to a children's soccer game, I think a judge will say this is not in the best interest of the children.
Because even if it's not about something between Kanye and Kim or anything, if it's just him upset about the soccer game.
Yeah, I get animated at the soccer game.
But we see stories every year, those parents that go too far.
Yes.
And is that what he did here? Now, we don't know what was said.
You got to control yourself.
But
you got to control yourself. And he's not. And he's at this inflection point where his business deals have been taken away from him. I don't know where this ends for Kanye West. I don't think it ends in a good place because he's backed into this corner. He's already an erratic person when things are going very well. He sort of thrives on chaos in a way like the Joker, right? I mean, he just lives and breathes for chaos. I mean, his Adidas deal would have had him set for life many, many times over, but he couldn't stay in that present moment to just be successful. He threw a piece of dynamite into his own life.
And his own career, his professional career, still at the end of the day, he'll have a lot of money.
Sure.
And he's got his respect for his music that he'll always have. The bigger problem, and this is an issue for Kim, and I think for a lot of parents, if she genuinely feels that he is becoming unsafe to be around the kids, he's erratic, that you don't know what he's going to do, and she wants to get sole custody and cut him off, will that just make it even worse?
It could. That's the problem with dealing with someone that volatile.
If Kanye lost access to his children, I think that would be a blow that would be, forget everything else.
Yes. And coping mechanisms are a big part of mental illness. Now, he doesn't like to say he's had mental illness. Now he's saying that he was misdiagnosed by doctors, never should have been on meds. He's been diagnosed as having something that he needs to deal with and that could be probably properly managed with some medicine, but he doesn't want it. And I just think he has a hard time coping with bad news and sort of misfortune in his life in a constructive way.
That's why I actually feel sorry for Kim in this situation because if she thinks, and not in a spiteful way, but if she very genuinely thinks maybe it's not in the kid's best interest for him to be around.
Yeah.
But then also knowing that if I pursue that, that's going to make things so much worse.
I know.
Like,
in this case,
it's lose-lose.
It is lose-lose. And although we just got done talking about Khloe and Tristen and whether things are for the cameras, I think she needs to handle this situation in a way that is entirely divorced from what's good for television. And I hope she does. I actually give Kim credit for, she seems like a good mother by all accounts. She seems very invested in the kids' lives to the extent celebrities are very invested. I'm sure she has help. I'm not saying that she has no help, but I think she will do what she believes is the right thing. And I hope that ratings for a television show don't factor into these kind of decisions because that would truly be unfortunate.
You'd think at a point she'd have to realize, relationship problems and breakups and all that kind of stuff is whatever. But now you're dealing with your kids.
You're dealing with your kids, and that's serious business. And there's a lot of lives at stake. All right, let's do it. Let's wrap it up there, and we'll see you guys next week. I think we've had enough downers, and I don't want to really end on talking about Paul Pelosi and the hammer attack. You guys can read about it on the website.